So I may have been a bit impulsive this last month. So when I'm DJing, I like to try and play a bit of what I like to call hidden gems in like my DJ sets. So particularly a lot of 90s or 2000s bands that may have not gotten the amount of attention they deserved back in the day or may have been forgotten, and try and like bring that back a little bit, mix things up a bit more. And in general, Bandcamp has been pretty good source for making some of these obscure releases available again. Like a lot of my Bandcamp purchases are actually for like older stuff, some of it actually pretty obscure. You'd be surprised at which bands are on Bandcamp, but they don't have everything. There's like some bands, they're not on Bandcamp, they're not on streaming. You might be able to find some songs on YouTube, but sometimes you might not even find everything on YouTube. So I kind of finally decided, you know what, if I really want to go into this and go all in on like having a good extensive library, I'm going to need to start getting used CDs. So I kind of decided to do that. I decided, okay, I'm just going to go all in. Everything I can think of that I might want later, for the time being, let's just go ahead and grab it all roughly around the same time. There was a little bit of staggering with grabbing all this. And so pretty much what happened is I wound out with a bunch of CDs. Like I've got a whole stack of 16 right here I'm going to talk about. And I thought, so in addition to me being able to like add this to my DG library and play it for people, share it that way, I can also do a video talking about some of the stuff I got, recommend bands to people to check out, because although not every song may be on YouTube on some of these albums, you can at least listen to it through YouTube or try and find it yourself, and maybe hopefully bringing some attention might encourage some of these bands to try to get this music available again, though I feel like the reason a lot of it isn't is more to do with legal rights than the bands themselves. And yeah, it's also worth noting this is not actually even everything I got. There's a few stuff that is still in the mail. I just kind of got impatient waiting for it all. And there's like two things I ended up getting on cassette that is being digitized at a friend's house right now, so I'm not going to talk about those either, because it's not as exciting to talk about something when I can't show you it up on the video. Right, so first album and band I got is Chance of Maldoror. I might have butchered that. So, best way to describe this band is it sounds a lot like Christian Death with Roz Williams. More so the singing voice than anything else. The singer of Chance of Maldoror sounds exactly like Roz Williams on the early Christian Death stuff. So think first three albums, not necessarily the later stuff like Iron Mask, where he's got a different singing style. And music-wise, I feel like it's kind of a little bit in between Only Theater of Pain and Ashes. It's not a direct clone of Christian Death by any means. It has its own unique sound, but definitely if you're a Christian Death fan, they're a band you might want to check out. Also have the Horati for their album Riposte. This band, I can't believe they're not bigger. So, band I would most compare them to is Corpus Delicti, not necessarily in that they sound super similar, but they both kind of have a slight Bauhaus vibe to them, just in different ways. So, I would kind of describe Corpus Delicti as almost like the Bauhaus, just removing all the non-goth stuff, focusing on pure goth. Horati I'd consider like building off more of the Bauhaus's quirkiness. They don't have like the same amount of genre bending that the Bauhaus did, but they got like a bit of a more lighthearted vibe to them. Got like some interesting songs on here, like Daryl and Alicia is pretty interesting because it's like a blatantly bisexual goth song. I know I think I've seen some people like asking about goth songs with direct LGBT themes. Daryl and Alicia is a good song to look for that. Next up, I have the Marionettes and their album Ava Dementia. So, best band to compare the Marionettes to is Nosferatu, although the vocals are less over-the-top ghoulish, they're a little bit more tame. And technically, the Marionettes came out before Nosferatu. This album actually came out in 1990. The band was formed, I think, in like 87. This came out the same year as Vision Thing. And like Vision Thing, it's kind of like more got like a harder rock vibe, but I would say Ava Dementia by the Marionettes is much better than Vision Thing. It's still very much got the goth vibes to it. It's almost kind of like campy horror hard rock. Not in like a Rob Zombie kind of way, more again like the way Sisters of Mercy, Nosferatu, that kind of stuff is. Got some really catchy songs on here like Ava Dementia and like Christabel. And they have like some of the best riffs out of like harder edged goth bands I have heard. Like I don't think anyone really like compares other than again Nosferatu with like the hard rock, early metal kind of riff vibe. Also have Every New Dead Ghost. This one is called, A New World. Got a bunch of tracks on the back here, track listing. So Every New Dead Ghost, they are more on the punky end of things. Not in like a death rock way. They're more like a British band, blatant British accent. I guess they're more like almost like a punk version of Killing Joke, New Model Army or whatever. And they're also actually a lot older than you'd think. They came out in the mid-'80s. This album came out in 1990. And yeah, so far, just worth mentioning, Marionettes and Orati are both 90s. Chance of Maldor, this album I think came out in 2000. But yeah, if you like kind of like a punk and goth crossover that's not necessarily death rock, but are like a fan of like New Model Army, Killing Joke, Every New Dead Ghost might be worth checking out. Next I have Faithful Dawn. Unlike a lot of the other albums on here, this one, you can hear it on Spotify. So this is something you can just go up and listen to completely now. The only reason I got this one is because I couldn't find like any digital copy. So Faithful Dawn, they are kind of like also worth mentioning their second album is on Bandcamp. Second album isn't quite as good as the first in my personal opinion, but it is available on Bandcamp, and I'd say it's still worth checking out. I think I'm like one of 2-3 people that bought it so far. But yeah, Faithful Dawn, they're dark wave in like a more dancey kind of way. I guess they're sort of like Cruise Shadows, but also sort of not. They kind of have like their own sound. It's kind of hard to explain until you like listen to them. But like they've got like some, Neverwhere is probably my favorite out of all of it. It's like very catchy, very dancey, still got like a crazy guitar solo in there. And also I really like Virtue too. It's kind of like a moodier song. But yeah, if you kind of like that 90s dark wave that's more like electronic than like new wavy, Faithful Dawn is a pretty good pick. And here is Last Dance, their album Perfect. So like Faithful Dawn, it's pretty much just this album I couldn't find a digital copy of. All the other Last Dances stuff is available outside some early cassette-only demos. Perfect happens to be like my favorite of theirs though, because I feel like it like hits the best balance. It's kind of like melodic. It's not super dark, but The Last Dance for the most part isn't. They're kind of more like, they're like London After Midnight if they were like more fairy tale themed, more bright. So London After Midnight kind of instrumentation with more of a Cruise Shadows mood kind of is how I would describe them. And this one like hits it the best. The synthesizers, they're not too like bleepy or like electronic music kind of style. They're more like, I guess, new wave or dark wave kind of sounding synths. Of course, they got like their guitar too. Last Dance is mostly guitar focused, even though they're a dark wave band. They're one of the bands I would like refer to as sort of like the onk wave kind of thing, where it's like synths, but also the guitar, like very specific American sound of dark wave. Yep, this one is on Spotify as well if you wanted to listen to it. Some of my favorites off this one are Winter and Without Words. Both kind of cheesy, but I love it. And Up next, I have Oneroid Psychosis. Sorry. They're kind of described as like progressive dark wave, and I feel like that's kind of a decentish way to describe them. They're very much emphasis more on like almost spooky soundtrack music, so think like Switchblade Symphony, only darker, and with slight bit of an industrial edge to them. Some of these tracks are instrumental, some aren't. They're like very eerie, very like atmospheric, and some of their songs, especially I think on their next album after this, they just kind of like change. It's not like A-B verse chorus song structures. They experiment a little bit more with your song structures. And I really like Oneroid Psychosis a lot. I guess another band you kind of compare them to is Super Aeternus, although they're more like synthy than medievally kind of sounding. Up next, I got like 3 bands. I got like 2 albums of each of them. So we're gonna go each band first. I'll just do the bands as a whole since I got multiple albums. So first of all, I have Dead Souls Rising. This one is both their first album and their demo on one thing. And I have second album here. So we got Ars Magica and Scented Garden. And both albums sound pretty similar. So this is Dead Souls Rising early 90s stuff. So the best way to describe it is it's very much like Switchblade Symphony and very much like Diva Destruction, somewhere in between the two. I feel like I actually kind of like Dead Souls Rising a little bit better than either of them, though. So you've kind of like got the moody synths, the more like distorted background guitar, woman singer. And although you can't get these easily, you can get Dead Souls Rising's newer stuff. So they have like 2 newer albums out too. They're a little bit more post-punky sounding. They're not quite the same as these, though I think they're still worth checking out as well. I need to like give those a better listen. And if you've ever seen Mephisto Wells' cover of like the Wind, or the most mysterious song on the internet, the singer of Dead Souls Rising is doing guest vocals on that. Some of my favorite songs off these include, Netherworld and Heretics off this one. And I still need to listen to this one a bit more, but I really liked like Fire Dance, for example. Next I have Frank the Baptist. And these are some of Frank the Baptist's earlier stuff. I know on streaming you can kind of hear some Frank the Baptist, but it's their newer stuff, which doesn't quite have like the same goth death rock vibe as the older stuff. I think it's like a bit more pirate themed and a bit more direct. So I know a lot of people might have like listened to the newer stuff and might not have liked it, but it's worth checking out their older stuff, even if you didn't like the newer. So yeah, they're part of like the mid-2000s, late 2000s death rock revival. They definitely aren't like your typical like Cinema Strange or Scarlet's Remains clone. The singer has a pretty distinct voice. It's kind of melodic, but also kind of like spooky. And you got like a lot of like flanged guitars and stuff on here. It's a little bit silly and spooky, edgy kind of deal. Like their song like Bleeding in My Arms is just kind of silly, but it's also like got a really good mood to it. And I really also love Falling Stars a lot. It's just straight up nice melodic song. Both these two are worth checking out. These were on Strobe Light Records, which sadly no longer exists, and most of their stuff isn't easily available. So it's not just Frank the Baptist, but Strobe Light put out a lot of stuff in the 2000s death rock revival that isn't quite so easy to find anymore, and it's a bit of a shame because a lot of stuff in like the 2000s death rock revival, we think of mostly the stereotypical bands again. We just think Scarlet's Remains, Cinema Strange is like the stereotype template, but there was actually quite a bit of variety in a lot of the bands. Sounded a lot more different than a lot of modern death rock bands, though modern death rock still has some variety. Next, I have Babylonian Tiles. Let me open one of these because I feel like, pretty sure one of them had like a really interesting picture in there that just kind of was like an excellent demonstration, sort of like how that 90s makeup curly-eyed style. They like have like the curly eye makeup. Let me see here. Okay, maybe not quite that, but you can kind of see here. Definitely an interesting style. The top hat. Just open up the other one. Maybe it was in there. But yeah, Babylonian Tiles is kind of like one of those like on the edges of goth kind of bands. Kind of like have like half a goth vibe, half like a psychedelic rock vibe. A lot of organ in their music. So like organ on pretty much all the songs. If you like Sunshine Blind or something, you'd probably like them. Definitely one of the more interesting out there bands that's worth giving a listen to. It really is kind of hard to describe them, but I definitely feel like they are worth checking out if you just like 90s goth bands in general, especially if you like something a little different from the stereotype. All right, and these last 10 bands, they're all more on the goth dark wave side, but I also got 3 industrial comps that I'm gonna like talk about at the same time because they're all related to each other. So over here, I have 3 compilations by If It Moves. We've got Cyberflesh Conspiracy, which is an electro threat beat compilation for the feet as well as the mind. This national showcase of harsh electronic dance bands contains no experimental noise collages, synth pop dry rot, or repetitive house tracks. It's cerebral, hard-edged technocore that does a body good. Yep, that is the description of this one. These all have just like brilliant descriptions. We have Rivet Head Culture, which is a digital cutthroat compilation for the feet as well as the mind. This If It Move compilation contains 19 unrestrained cybo dance digicore beat deviants and no techno house, new wave / age, grindcore, experimental noise, or instrumentals, and only 1 Christmas song. And yeah, there's a Christmas song apparently at the end called Flesh House, Santa in Flames. And just to mention, it says Rivet Head Culture. This is where the term Rivet Head comes from, specifically the name of this album, and from a track on ChemLab's Burnout at the Hydrogen Bar called Rivet Head. These both came out in '93. In fact, this has ChemLab on it even. It's got the song Neurozone, which is also on here. Yeah, that's kind of where the term came from. Rivet Head was with what was called American Cold Wave, which I'll explain what that is in a second. I just want to get through the 3rd CD first. And we have Scavengers in the Matrix. Look at that edgy anime girl on there. She's about to like stick a knife in her throat. It's another Necrotech comp for the feet as well as the mind. And it says music for computer hacking, carjacking, and dance floor brutality. And I just like love these names. It's all just like silly, edgy nonsense. And yeah, so this would all, in general, because obviously there's some variety in the names of the bands, but this is what was called actually in the United States Cold Wave back in the day. Some people were probably familiar with French Cold Wave, but for the most part, people weren't really familiar with it. So at one point, another record company put out a comp of music like this called Cold Wave Breaks, and that's where I guess the term kind of came from. And I know there's been like other proposed names for it, like synthcore and machine rock, but most people I know, which is not just what I heard on the internet, but a lot of people older than me do call this stuff Cold Wave. And it's pretty much a good way to describe it is it's sort of industrial rock, but more emphasis on the industrial side. Like take mainstream industrial rock like Stabbing Westward, Filter, Gravity Kills. They're kind of more on the rock end. A lot of these bands, if you took out the guitars, you still might have like a song structure in there. They got a little bit more synth. They're a bit more underground, a bit harsher. Interesting, a lot of these bands actually have like some slight hip hop elements to them. But yeah, people really did call it Cold Wave back in the day. I know it sounds kind of weird nowadays when everyone thinks of Cold Wave as the French term, but it's just one of those things where a term popped up in multiple countries just without context of each other, and it was just happened to be a weird coincidence that there are styles of music that could possibly be played in the same club. And yeah, I still need to really listen through all these properly, but so far from what I've listened to, it's like really good stuff. If you happen to like the more early 9 Inch Nails stuff like Pretty Hate Machine or Wish, and like want something that's kind of like a combination of that, this kind of stuff might be your thing. If you like more mainstream industrial rock, it probably won't be. And not all of it's like rock focused, some of it's like more electronic. And yeah, that's pretty much about all I got here. If people like this video, if people think it's like interesting, I can always do more later. I'll have to wait and see if I can get enough like physical CDs to do another video with physical CDs, but as I mentioned, there's also like a lot of obscure old stuff on Bandcamp too. I could always do a video talking about stuff on Bandcamp instead. And if you're interested in hearing some of this music, I do not only DJ in person, but I'm also occasionally DJ on Twitch with the Twitch name Zazie_Moondust, all in lowercase, and I'm gonna put the link to my Twitch in the video description as well. So if you're interested in hearing any of this or like any other, especially goth, but also a little bit of industrial too, then like give my YouTube channel a subscribe or just check it out whenever I'm streaming, and you might hear something new. I always, in the comments, I post what song's playing too, so you can know to look it up later. And that's about it for the video. I will hopefully make another one soon. But if not, it's because I'm like working on other stuff, like the Twitch channel right now. I'm trying to do a little bit of DJing for that, or for like real life stuff. But hopefully, because like it hasn't been that long since my last video, hopefully the next one will not be too far from now. Anyway, bye everyone, until next video.